Yeah, good morning, guys, and welcome once again to today's class. Today, we'll be looking into asynchronous programming. And before you understand what asynchronous programming means, it simply means that JavaScript automatically runs on what is called synchronous code, which simply does what JavaScript does is they run the code line by line. If line 1 is not completed, line 2 cannot run. If line 2 is not completed, line 3 cannot run. And if line 3 is not completed, line 4 cannot run. That is what asynchronous programming does, because when you are fetching API, when you are fetching what an API simply means, the meaning of an API is application programming interface. Application programming interface is a bunch of data which is called from an external source. And as a front-end developer, you have to consume such API to display, because the data that are coming from the API, which I would probably just I can interchange it with API or endpoint. It can be, I can actually switch between those two words, API or endpoint. It's something that you would hear regularly when you are working with APIs. Okay, I am working on this endpoint, it's not working. So I might switch the words, so don't be confused when I say that. Okay, this the data you're getting from this endpoint or the data you're getting from this API. Please don't be confused at that point. That's why I'm just trying to clear that, because they can be used interchangeably. So every data you'll be getting from an endpoint are just going to be a bunch of data which you would want to display on the browser for your users to see. I will use an e-commerce website for example. Some of the data you see on your e-commerce website, they are not static actually. They are coming from an external source. It's just a link. It's just a link that is holding all those data, which the front end developer is actually going to just pick on the front end and render the data for the users to see. So let me show you an example. I know we have done synchronous programming over time. We have done synchronous programming over time, but I know that we might have forgotten. Just to run us through it. This is what a synchronous programming looks like. Let me include something in our JavaScript. Let me include a p tag. Let me include a p tag and just say hello. My name is Femi. So let's go to our JavaScript and select that p tag. Let me give it a class so you would also understand. Class name details. I'm sure everyone is familiar with what I'm doing right here. Nobody is not familiar with it. Const username 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 equals document dot query selector. Yeah, who that is, what class name did I give to it? Details. So does anyone have any question with this on how? Oh, my screen, sorry. I My screen is actually tiny. I actually like using a tiny screen. I'm so sorry about that. But who is that? You can always check your network. You can't see anything. Samson, is your network? Kindly drop off the call and join back again, please, so that you can always catch up with us. Yeah. So what I just did right here was just selecting the name we had in on our front in our HTML, and I want to re-render. I want to change the text. If we go to our browser now, let's see what we have on our browser. Where is it? Where is it? Coming. Okay, this is not it. Let me go live. Sorry, I'm live already. Let me see the name of this class, Asynchronous Programming. So let me refresh the page. So you can see now, I have it here. Hello, my name is Femi. And on our JavaScript, we want to do something asynchronously. So let's run this. Let's do a p.text content, which is something we are familiar with. P.text content, because I'm trying to change the name right here. My name is Francis is IK. So I'll do something called an alert. So you can see that if one does not run, the others will be blocked. It's time for class. Then we change the color. We add a color to this dot color equals red. So let's check. Who can tell me what is going to happen on this code that we just wrote? Can someone just looking at the way I explained synchronous programming? Can someone tell me what is going to happen on this line of code? Hello, can anyone unmute and tell me what is going to happen on this line of code with what? Hello, is that okay? Ezekiel, go ahead.
So I think the first thing will happen is the text content will change to my name is Ike. So we didn't create any form of something that event. So immediately we just open the website, the site, it immediately change to my name is Ike. Then there'll be an alert. And after an alert, the color will be changed.
Okay. All right. So let's check that out. Also, let's check it out and see. Let's refresh the page. P is not defined. Oh, sorry. I made um you can see one thing I said about asynchronous programming. Though our HTML ran, but nothing in our JavaScript actually ran. So I would I used a username here, but I was actually using a P in when we're trying to check the text content. So P was not defined. So let's check this out. So you can see that the first thing that actually ran was actually the alert. And by the time I click OK, you can see my name is IK. And what is this? A username. Okay, let me change this to username. So you can actually see that the first thing that ran was actually the alert. The reason why that actually ran was because um, alert has an higher priority in JavaScript actually. Alert has an higher priority in JavaScript, making it sure that the alert is a function from JavaScript. It takes higher there's something in JavaScript called high precedence order. Some JavaScript function actually take precedence over some of the things you do, such like an alert function. An alert, let's say an alert is not really a JavaScript an alert is a JavaScript function, but it basically works with your Windows. So once your code is being read and it sees an alert, the alert is first triggered, and once the alert is triggered, every other code after that you would say you probably say that JavaScript actually changed the order of your code, but it did like I don't it changed it didn't change the order of your code, but it is the way in which JavaScript renders some of these functions. That is why you can see that the alert came before every other code we wrote on the screen. So do you understand the explanation I gave? Hello guys, do you understand the explanation I gave? I don't want you guys to respond in the chat box. This should be a communication, not just a monologue. What just not just this should not be a monologue. It should be a dialogue. If you ask a question, please always respond. So I don't want to be going to the chat box to be checking, okay, has someone responded or not. Yeah, what if we use a differ? I'm actually using a differ keyword. I didn't show you my HTML structure. I'm actually using a differ keyword here. Um, who wrote that? Paul. Can you see my HTML? You can see I am actually having a differ keyword. So you can see I'm having a differ keyword. So for the differ keyword, my HTML has loaded already. My HTML has loaded in the background already. But my alert has to come up first. I'm not waiting for an external, let's say I'm waiting for an external API source now. That is when my alert is actually going to do what? That is when my alert is probably going to, that's when my differ is going to work. My HTML page is going to load. The content of my HTML page is going to load. Then I'm going to have a loading state, which is going to be rolling for all my data to come to the front end before it can be displayed. That is what it actually means. That's what the differ keyword does. John, do you understand? Okay. Am I the one, but are you using a earpiece? Because you're kind of far away from your. Okay, so you're kind of far away from it. So that is what that is. I can barely hear you. So let's continue. And so if you want to say something is asynchronous, this is what an asynchronous function looks like. An asynchronous function, there are some functions in JavaScript which can make something looks asynchronous, which is something like this. Let's have an asynchronous function. Let me write this. This is synchronous function. Synchronous function. Okay, let me comment this out because I don't want this to show again on my screen. So we have selected that we have a set timeout is more like an asynchronous function because every other code is going to run before your set timeout function is going to run. Function. So what function do you want to write? You want to use a username dot text content. You would see that this our text content is not going to change until after some certain minutes in which we have in which the set timer is. That's when the name is going to change. My name is John Abraham. John, let me just use John. Then I will set a timer. This is what makes the timer work. When I write 5,000, that is, I'm giving it 5,000, 5 seconds, not 5,000 seconds. So I have a P, then I change the style, I change the username, I change the color to red. So let's see how this is going to work. From this analogy, it simply means that this our function here is actually going to work before this. The color is going to change to red before the name will change on the screen is actually going to work. So I'm just simulating an asynchronous function. You can see here now. Okay, let me refresh it. It has changed already. You can see that my name is Femi came first. Then after 5 seconds, you can see it changed to my name is John. Do you understand a scenario of that asynchronous function?
Yes, sir.
Yes, we
Yes, sir.
understand.
Okay. All right. So when yeah, do you have a question? Hello, is there any question? Someone was trying to say something when I caught the person. Hello, can you hear me, please?
I think there's a
No,
question.
sir.
We can hear you, but somebody wanted to ask a question. Who was that?
Yeah, I knew someone wanted to ask a question, so the person just cut. All right. If the person wants to ask the question, you can just drop it in the chat box and we'll check it out to respond. Yeah, so that's just a brief on what asynchronous programming does. And if you want to make a request to an API, there are ways in which we make a request to an API. And to make a request to an API, you simply have to use, there's a function called the fetch function. The fetch function in JavaScript is what we basically use to get data from an external source, because we have to put in a link into it to get the data for what we need. And for us to be able to run our code, I have a dummy, I have this link. Where is it? I have this link. Um, I have this link right here. I just copied it so I don't have to. Let me copy this. I have this link right here, which is what we'll be working with in today's class. It is a REST API. If we go to the REST API, this is where I got the link from. Let's go to REST API, REST country API, REST country API. So there's actually a list of free API you can actually use, and I've worked with the REST country APIs multiple times, and that is why I know that this is quite easy for everyone to understand. So if you, this is how an API, this is what an API looks like. You can see that. Let me show you the demo of how the code is eventually going to look, what is going to eventually look like on the screen. But this code base should have been updated. This code base should have been updated over time, and it has not been updated because the new link is actually restcountries.com/API/version 3.1. So this is what we want to do. So let's try this out and see what is going to give us on the screen. Console.log. So this link is where we are fetching our data from. This link is actually where we are fetching all of our data from, and it is what is holding over 1001 data for us to use on our screen. So let's console.log response and see what is going to give us. I'm sure I would have an error on my screen here. I'm sure I'm going to have an error on my screen here saying not found. Yes, it's going to say not found, but I'm not going into that yet. You can see that when you are making an API call using fetch, there are three states. You would see it's a promise. When you are making an API call with JavaScript and you're using the fetch function, when you go into React, you can also use fetch or Axios. You can use Axios in JavaScript, but you have to start importing Axios from Axios. But the inbuilt way to fetch data from an external source is actually using the fetch function. And for the fetch function, is actually going to return a promise. And what is a promise? A promise has two states in JavaScript, which is the pending state and the fulfilled state. Hello guys, please, am I communicating?
Yes, sir.
Okay. For JavaScript, as JavaScript promise has two states, which has the pending state and the fulfilled state. What is three states actually? The pending state, the fulfilled state, and the rejected phase, and the failed state. Let me say that the failed state, because once you click a button, the moment you click a button in JavaScript and you're making an API request, what that simply does is sending a request to the backend. It is sending a request. Okay, on click of that button, you want to get some data from the API, and when you click that button, it's pending. That means you have to load. I'm sure that we have encountered that when you're signing up a user now, by the time you are signing up on an account, or when you're registering on an account, you would see that by the time you click a button, you would see a loading state. You will see probably like a loader or something telling you that, okay, please wait, something like that. Have anybody encountered something like that before?
Yes,
Hello?
sir.
Yeah, so you would see something like, okay, you just see a loader or a spinner on the screen trying to load. That is the pending state of a promise. That means the request is being made. So when the request is being made, you now have two states that is going to either return to you. There's either going to be a fulfilled state or a rejected state. That is the only two states that can come back from a promise, which is that if you get a success message, that means that your response was what? Your response, when you get a, if you navigate, let me use a sign up for example now. When you sign up for on a on an application and all your details are correct and there's no network issue, what do? It gives you a success message, and that success message says that you are now signed up, or it sends a message to you saying that you an email has been sent to your a verification email has been sent to you. Check your email box to verify your email. Those are some of the responses you will get. But if you are signing in as a user, one of the things you are going to get is simply that you are just going to navigate you into your bank app. Our bank app that we have been using over and over again. Let me use that scenario. You can see the bank app that you can use your normal bank application. Once you log into your bank application, it takes you to your dashboard. And on that dashboard, those details that are there are not only all that API. The API that is fetching that details is the API that is making that request is that once you click on that button and it does some validation behind the scene to see that if your password is correct and the email address, first thing it's going to check is your email address is registered with the bank, first of all. And if your email address is correct, the next thing it's also going to check is that if the password you entered is correct. So when those two states, independent state of a promise, is actually checking those two things. If one, the email address you entered is registered in the database, and the password you entered is actually the correct password attached to that email address. So the moment that both of them are correct, what does it do? It shows you a welcome message. Either it just goes into your what's the name? It goes into your bank app, and you'll be able to see all your transactions and every other thing. But if your what's the name? If your either your password or your email is not correct, you would see a message on the screen saying wrong username or password. As anyone, I know everyone are familiar with that, but I don't want to assume. Are we familiar with those kind of steps? That is simply what a promise does in JavaScript. Do you understand with the explanation I gave? Do you understand what a promise does?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. So that is basically what a promise does. A promise is just let me use on that scenario so that we can understand. Those of us in Nigeria, we have made use of promise card during the Christmas period. Can we remember those promise card we have during December period? That you buy it probably for 15 naira, and they'll have different kind of gift on it. You're not gonna meet our uncles. Oh yeah, promise me something. You will now write it. Okay, I promise you 1,000 naira, and that they have made that promise. The moment they write that 1,000 naira on the card, they have made that promise. It now depends on two things. One, that the promise has to be fulfilled, or they don't fulfill it. We know we have so many uncles back then that they'll just tell us, okay, I'll promise you this, and probably to eternity, they don't fulfill that promise. So if the uncle gives you that money, the promise is being fulfilled. But if the uncle does not eventually give you that money, what does it do? The promise is never fulfilled. That means the promise is rejected. Do we understand the analogy? Hello, do we understand the analogy?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so thank you. Please, if you have any question, you can always draw me back so that I can explain better. So let's go into this API that we want to call. So what we are trying to do with this API is simply that we want to get the details of Nigeria. We actually want to get the details of Nigeria. And how are we going to do that? All the details of Nigeria is saved in this country. It's saved in this country API. But it's actually all the details about Nigeria is saved in this country's API, and we have to write a function for that. So let's do that. So we are going to be using it to get multiple countries. So I want to just write a simple function that we can use over and over again to get multiple countries. So let's have this const get countries, get country equals function country, and yes, I have a fetch function right here. I'm still going to use the same fetch, and you can see I want to make this function reusable, so I'm going to pass a prop of country right here. I'm going to pass a prop of country. Then we do a fetch, and let me just copy this right here. Let me just copy all this. Let me just copy all this because it's simply going to be what I'm going to use to make the function, but I'm not going to pass in Nigeria yet. I want to make the function reusable. So I'm going to pass in our prop of country here. Do we understand what I'm actually doing here of passing a prop? That means I'm creating a reusable code over and over again so that I can use that over time. Sorry, please, can you see my screen? Am I making sense? Are you understanding it? Because I know that
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
fetching data is something that as a
No,
developer.
sir.
Okay, wait. Just I'm going to come back. I'm going to explain it over again. Something that you should know is that as a developer, you would always fetch data every day. Every day you go to work as a front-end developer, you would always fetch. You always perform an action using API. So this is something that I am explaining. So Paul, don't worry. Once I write this function and you see it on this, and you see it, I'm not going to go over it again. So the first thing I'm actually doing is I want to get the details of Nigeria. I want to get the details of any country. And this link is called an API. Or I can simply put it's called an endpoint. Let me just say that. It's called an endpoint. But if I try to access these details on a browser, let's check it out. Let's check what we have right here. Let's see the response it's going to give to us. You can see that it gives us the list of all the details of Nigeria. If we put another country there, let's put another country there, Portugal. So once we put Portugal there, once we put Portugal there, it's going to give us audio details for Portugal. But your users cannot start reading this. You can't send this to your users and they will understand. Paul, if I send you this kind of data to your front end to be able to read, can you read it? Can you read this kind of data?
I'll be shocked now. I'll be shocked.
So this is how every details you are making, this is how the request from an endpoint comes from. You can actually see that everything is wrapped in an array. Can you see that? Can you see that everything is wrapped in an array of objects?
Yeah.
Miriam, you have a question? Your mic went.
No, I'm asking you a question.
You're
No,
asking
you
me a
asked that.
question?
Can we see that? No, I didn't.
Okay.
I answered your question. You said, can we see that everything is wrapped in an array of bug? And I said yes.
Okay, all right. So we can see that this is how an API, this is how the details are coming from the endpoint. This is how it's coming from the API. So what you have to do as a front-end developer is there are three kind of there are three kind of there are three kind of requests you can make to an endpoint, which is the CRUD request. I just have to ship that in. What is a CRUD request? You there's a this is create, read, edit, and delete. So for a create, that means once you are creating an account, on your bank application, that is what you are making a CRUD request. That means you are creating an account. That means you are creating something. Once you are kind of getting a data, what we did right here, the kind of function we have right here is actually a get request. What you're actually doing here is actually a get request. That is a read. Then if you are trying to edit, now once you have created an account, you have created your profile, you want to change your name, on your profile page. That is what is called an edit. It can either be called a patch request or a put request. Once we go deep into APIs from the next class, we'll be doing those kind of requests. We'll be actually creating an application whereby we'll be using a CRUD request. So by the time you are updating something, the U in the CRUD request means update. That means you are trying to update a data. By the time you create an account, you have inputted your details at first, and you feel like, I misspelled my name at this point, and I want to change it. That is when you are making a CRUD. That's when you are updating your details. And by the time you are deleting, you want to delete something on your page. You are going to use the delete request. That is the three kind of requests you can make to an endpoint. You either create a request, you can create, you can get, you can update, and you can delete. Those are the kind of four most popular requests you can make. There are other kind of requests you can make, but those are the kind of four. You hear them saying, I created a CRUD application. What does a CRUD application do? You create, you read, you update, and you delete. That is what it stands for. So back to what we have right here, you can see that yes, these are the details we have, and our users can't see this. If we send this kind of details to our users, they'll be so confused that what is this developer sending to me? How do you want me to start interpreting it? You want me to start reading each line of code one after the other to be able to understand what I want to do. So now, as a front-end developer, once your back-end developer has given you this code, has given you the response from the backend, what do you want to do? You want to simply render it on the screen. So when you have a promise, this fetch is actually giving you a promise. Then you do a .then in front of it. When you do a .then, you will do let's console.log our response. No, sorry, I skipped something here. Once you do a .then, there will be a function. There should be a function right there, function that is going to hold the response, function of response. Then what you are going to do next is you console.log the response. You are not going to console.log the response actually, but you are going to render the response on the screen. I want to show you what we are going to get. Console.log response. So let's call this function. Someone should give me a name of a country that we could actually check the details, that we can actually get the details. Give me
Nairobi.
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 Nairobi is the capital. The name of
Lesotho.
Kenya.
Lesotho.
Kenya. So let's check for Kenya. It has to be in small letter. Kenya. So let's check what we have in our browser. Where is it? You can see that at this point, when your response is coming, this is how it comes. This is how it comes, because we are yet to do it. We are yet to convert it to something actually, which I'm going to do in the next phase. So by the time you make an API request, this is what you are going to get. First of all, you are going to have your you are going to have the body, the use body, the header, and some of the times when you are making an API request, this status, I'm going to give you guys an assignment now. You guys should go and read up of status code, API status code. Francisca, please, can you help me pen that down so I don't forget? Francisca,
Okay, sir.
yeah, just let me pen that down. Read up on status code, different kind of status code we have from an API. I will just give you some hints. 200, there are status code from 200 to 500. So once you see a 200 status code, what does it mean? And once you see a 500 status code, what does it mean? In between that 200 to 500, there are different kind of code in between. So as a front-end developer, you have to understand what it means, what each status code means. So I've given you that assignment now. You're not going to submit it. You're just going to write a simple article about it and drop it on the chat box on our Discord channel. I'm going to check them one after the other. I'm going to check them one after the other. So just read up on status code. So let's continue. So now we have a status code of 200. That means this application, this request is actually successful. The request we made to this endpoint is actually successful. So what is the next thing we have to do? We have to convert this response. We have to convert it to a JSON. Response, we have to do a return statement because we are passing a function here. So for us to be able to get the details, we have to convert it to a JSON. That's response.json. Who can tell me what a JSON means? Who can tell me the meaning of a JSON? It's something that something that you guys should have seen times without number. Who can tell me what a JSON simply means? Who can tell me what a JSON simply means? Nobody knows the meaning of JSON, really, and we are front-end developers. Oh, Bolwatife, I can't hear you if you are speaking. Hello, can anyone hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Okay. All right.
We
Ezekiel,
know
tell
Jason
me
now. We know Jason.
what is the meaning of JSON? What is the meaning of JSON?
JavaScript object notation.
Okay.
So JSON is just like a server.
JavaScript object notation, because all the data you'll be getting are going to just come in bunch of data. So you have to convert it to a JSON first of all, so that you can be able to get the details you need from it. So now we have converted this data into a JSON, and now we want to render it on the screen. The next thing we now have to do is we have to do a .then again. But one thing you have to know is that if you are using Axios is something that you are going to use later on. We are not going to be using it in this period, but Axios is an external package which is actually used to make API requests. So we do another .then we have a function right there. We have a function and we wrap it into the data. So what do we need from here? We now do a console.log data. So now, because for every response that is coming, there is always going to be a data. And what that data simply does is what you are going to render on the screen. Paul, I'm coming, just a second. I saw your hand is raised. Just a second. So you can see that on line 69 right here, we have an array of objects, another array of objects. and it's simply giving us the details of everything about Kenya. Can you guys see? Can we see?
Yes, sir, we
Yes,
can.
sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You
Yes,
can see
sir.
that every details here are the details that someone have uploaded about Kenya. So let's also say someone should give me another one for another country so we can actually test it again. Which other country should we
Lesotho.
Lesotho.
Spain.
Lesotho. Uh,
OTHO.
yeah, Lesotho. Yeah. So Lesotho. Let's check what we have. You can see on line 69 again, we have for Lesotho. That means we made two API calls. We made two API calls to one to Kenya and one to Lesotho, which is, you can see we have audio details about Lesotho right here. Paul, what's your question? Let me answer your question.
Okay, sir. What I wanted to ask is that when you were explaining the JSON, I was told that a JSON is always used when you want to convert a string into a JavaScript object. Like you want, like for example, you want to pass it into an internal local kind of host or something. I don't know. Am I being correct? But somebody I read that a JSON is only used when, for example, now in this thing that you fetch, that fetch is a string. Like maybe that's why we're using a JSON to convert it back to a
Yes, you have to
JavaScript.
first convert it. Yeah, once it's coming actually, it comes in a form which it comes in a string. That same thing someone have actually told me, but it's been a while I used it, so I actually don't use fetch any longer. I actually use axis most of the time because I am writing React, but I have to go back to fetch. So it comes in a string. So for you to be able to make use of it in JavaScript, you have to convert it to a JSON. That's why you have to use this JSON function on it, basically. So by the time you use this JSON function on it, it converts it into an array of objects, which you can use. It converts to a JSON document, which is what you are going to consume as a developer. But if you are using, what's the name? If you are using Axios, Axios has done audio conversion for you behind the scene. You are just getting your data and you are using it straight away. But for fetch, you have to convert it to JSON first of all. Do you understand?
Yes, sir. Yes, I understand. Thank you.
Yeah, so now we have gotten our data for each of the countries. So let's also check for Nigeria. We are in Nigeria, so let's also check for Nigeria. So let's see what we have. We can see that now we made 3 different API calls to 3 different countries. And we have this, and you can see audio details about Nigeria is right here. Please, mind you, it is not that these details were formulated from somewhere. It is someone that wrote this code. It is a developer that wrote all these details into and uploaded it online for us to be able to use actually. So do we understand? So now what is the next thing we want to do? We have gotten all these details. We now want to render it on the screen. We now want to render it on the screen. For Afolabi, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, sir. I was going to ask from the link, the API that you fetch, we added country. What if we are just inputting the name of the country in that space?
Yeah, it's still going to work.
Putting get country.
I want to be able to get multiple countries. That's why I passed a prop of countries into it.
Okay. But do we still need to convert it to JSON if I'm using a particular country?
Yes, you still have to you still have to convert it to a JSON if you are using a particular country, actually. So let's try that out. Let's try Nigeria right here.
Okay.
Let's do Nigeria right here, and we just call the function directly. Let's just call the function and remove this Kenya from it. Let's call the function and just do this. So you can see we still have to convert it to JSON. But for us to be able to use the function over and over again, to be able to call multiple countries, to get the details of multiple countries, that is why that's why I had a country prop there. I'm passing it as a country into it.
Okay.
Do you understand?
Yeah, I do. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I can actually just name it anything. I can just let me name it KodeCamp. KodeCamp. The prop I'm passing into it does not really matter. Let me also pass KodeCamp here. KodeCamp. Because this KodeCamp is not what is sending to the backend. It is this Kenya it is actually sending to the backend. If you see now, you can see that if you can see the URL link, you can see API. I said API. https://restcountries/api.com/version3/name/Kenya. You can see that is this Kenya I passed right here when I'm calling the function. If I don't put anything right here, it's not going to go through.
Okay.
If I just do this, you can see that I have undefined, and I'm getting a status message of 404, and the status code of 404, which is also something you will see as a developer. Once you check out audio kind of status codes we have the client side status code, we have the server side status code, and we also have message, which is not found. So by the time we pass in a country, let me put which country do I want to put? USA. Let me just put USA and check it out. By the time I put USA, you can see the URL actually changed. It is now https://countries.com/version3.1/name/USA. And when we check the response we have from there, it gives us audio details about USA. Who asked that question?
Now I understand. Thank you, sir.
All right. You're welcome. ID, you have a question?
Yes, I have a question.
All
Now,
right.
if you look at under cost get country, I can see that you have like a fetch. Then you have at the end you have the KodeCamp. Now I was wondering, why is there any need for us to use the const response? Why don't I just wait when I'm calling the function on get country? I just put in my country. Won't that still give us the same answer? Must I still define the variable response above?
Where are you defining is it right here?
No, if you look at your code,
yes,
the first variable, which is const
no,
response.
I'm not using this. I'm not using this at all. I'm not using
okay.
this.
Okay.
I'm not using that line of code at all. On line 60, I'm not using it at all.
But please let me see your code again. Sorry. Because I'll be confused if we're using that same code.
No, I was not using the code on line 60 at all. Because from the code I'm actually working with is everything from line 62 to 74.
So this one we have function response. What's that? Then we have
this function response is that I am getting the response. Okay, don't worry. Let me show you another way of doing it. So let's do const get country details. We have equals fetch function country equals this. We now have const response equals this.
I think I need to
just do this. have this. We just do response response response.json, and we just do console.log response. Oh, sorry, I'm having KodeCamp here. Let me do country. So let's do get country details. So we do this for Lesotho, Control V, and let's see what we have. Okay, response. The JSON is not a okay. I have to put a dot then right here. I have to do this. You have to return it because it's actually a function return.
Sorry, sir. As you are typing this, I don't know if I can talk.
Yeah, you can go ahead. You can talk actually.
Okay. There's one problem I'm having is how to read these error messages. Like
Okay,
you
error
didn't put
handling.
dots then. So when you check that stuff and it was just he told you that something. So you went back. You already know where you are pointing at. So that one I think I'm always having problem with that to read error messages. How
Okay,
did you
error
get to know?
message. Okay, this is it. I think it's all. I was actually going to do that. So this is it. Once you write a code like this, you would just come. Once you go to your console, you would see that
Yes.
you would see response is saying response.json is not a function. That means
Okay.
on script.js76 at get countries, it has told me the line where it's coming from. So
Okay.
what do I have to do? I just have to come here on line 76 and I get what I'm looking for. So this is what we have to do. Dot then, and I pass this in. I do a function res equals response. So sorry, response. That will be response.json return response.json this. So we do a console.log response right here. So let's check it out. Let's check out what we have right here. You can see online 80 is actually returning a promise. You can actually see someone was asking that question. ID, yeah, it was you.
Yes,
ID.
I'm here.
So you can see that what I did right here was what this line 75 is actually giving us is actually returning a promise for us, which is either going to be the pending state or the fulfilled state. So you can see it has returned the promise for us, and the next thing we have to do now is please can you drop the extension you're using to complete the function. I'm actually not using any extension, I'm just using my tab key. I'm just using my tab actually. So we do a dot then right here, and we do this. We do function. And we do data, and we do this. We do console.log data. So what we actually did right here is we actually chaining multiple then together. So let's check what we have. Okay, so we can see on line 80 we have our response. We have the same thing we have on line 69 is the same thing we have on line 80 actually. So we are good to go. It's just the same way. You don't necessarily have to start. You don't have to start going through complex ways to actually do it. That's why I didn't want to take you to the route of first defining a variable name for the fetch, since a fetch can actually stand alone, and we just write what we want to write. Paul, your question, please. Paul, your
No,
question.
sir, I've gotten it from the DM. Sorry, I was just looking for something, sir. No vex.
All right, no problem. Yeah, so that is how we get a response. That's how we get it. So the next thing we now want to do is we want to render it on the screen. And can someone tell me how we render details on the screen? Oh, sorry. Can someone tell me how we render details on the screen? We did it in the last class. So what do we have to do? Can someone explain? Can someone explain what we are going to do? Paul, you were in the last class. Afolabi, you were in the last class. Boluwatife, you were in the last class. Damilola, you were in the last class. Ezekiel, you were in the last class. And I rendered some details from JavaScript. I rendered some details from JavaScript to the front end. Damilola. Paul, are you now silent?
Sir, to be sincere with you, in the last class, I was just there like lock of wood. I was not feeling fine.
I swear I slept all through the class.
Wait, why did you sleep all through the class? Was it
Charlie took some medication. Seriously.
Damn, your network is breaking. I can't hear you. Okay, all right. So no problem. Don't worry. I'm going to do it. Okay, Ezekiel, go ahead. Ezekiel, go ahead. The hand is raised.
Okay, so I think the first thing you have to get the document where you want to display the elements.
Okay. Okay, this is where we want to display the element actually. We want to display the element inside. You have told me what to do. Don't worry, Ezekiel, you're going to be the one to walk me through it. So your others can learn from that. So I want to render it inside this countries div on my front end on line 13. So I've done that already. So I come to my JavaScript, right? And I have what is there. I have attached it already. I have targeted the country, which is this div of countries. I gave it countries container. And so that I can be able to use it multiple times, I created a function like the way we did in the last class. I created this function called render countries, which I have actually predefined from my HTML already, and I've given the style from my HTML. So what is the next thing I have to do? This class that is right here, I passed it as a condition. Into our HTML. So what do we want to do? The next thing we have to do is, you can see that this is our HTML structure, the article and the likes. We are familiar with HTML already. And before I render this HTML, I want you to see something. So I'm going to console.log data. So you can see I passed this as a prop right here. And let me just comment this out. Pass this as a prop right here. And the next thing I want to do is, I'm going to, while I have this data right here, I'm going to do a render country. And I'm going to pass in the data into this place. And I'm going to put, who knows why I want to put an index of of 0 right there? Who knows why I'm putting that array index of 0 right there?
So you start from the first element.
All right, that's the simple reason why I'm putting that right there. So render countries on line 70, and why is this not working? On line 10. So the next thing we want to do is we just put the square bracket of 0. That it should render the first details. And we have get countries, and you can see the details we are actually going to be working with is all these details that was passed into the array of objects. And once you can see it, you can see that everything has something attached to it. So what are the things we want to render about USC? We want to render the country name. You can let me show you our HTML structure. We want to render the country's name. We want to render the country's name, the flag, the name, the region, the population, the country, and the currency. So sometimes this is a public API. So the details, the way they are arranged, are kind of varies actually. But for us right here, what we are going to simply do is we are going to now check these details one after the other and now render it on our screen. So this is it. We have gotten these details, and let's now check it out. So we have data, and we have the country flags.png. If we check right here, we can see that we have an object that contains flag right here, which we are picking the PNG file that is inside. That is why you can see that I have data.flags.png, which is one. The next one we want to actually target is the country's name. We now have country's name. Where is it? We have countries.data.name. Where is the name? The name is right here. You can see that under the name we have common. That's why we're able to target data. This question mark. Okay, let me now explain what this question mark does. Can anyone tell me what this question mark actually does? Can anyone tell me what this question mark actually does?
So it's an us or.
Emmanuel,
So
that's not kind of correct actually.
it's like maybe if it's not data, then dot name. I think so.
Okay, all right. So the simple reason why we are using that question mark is simply because that one, when you are making an API call, it is simply that some data might not be available at that point. When the data might not be available at that point, so you have to put an optional chaining in front of it. That is why that question mark is there. Because if you don't put that optional chaining in front of it, if the data is not, if the page is fully loaded and the data is not there, what is it going to do? It's not going to show on the screen. So let's try that with this common. Let's do this here. Let me remove this name, and let's check it out. So let's see what we have. You can see Ezekiel, are you guys following? You can see that online, you can see it's giving us an error. Someone asked about error handling the other time. Who asked about
Yes,
error
I am.
handling? Okay. Afolabi, you can see that we have our data right here, and
Yes.
it's telling us that type error cannot read property of undefined, which is read name at render countries. That is telling me on script.js line 22. and at render country script.js line 22 column 74. So let's check it out. You can see this is it on line 17 right here. It's telling me it cannot read property of name, which is name is undefined. But if I do this, if I put a question mark in front of it, and let's check it out again, it's still telling us that name is undefined. The reason why name is undefined is simply because though we have a name right here, but the name is not a string. It's actually an object.
Okay, but then we need to define it.
Yes. So you now
By
see that
putting
we have a name, and we now go into it. When we have gone into that name, we now have a common. We now do a question mark again, dot common. By the time we do this, we should have our details on the screen already. Which other one is here? This other one that is saying name is not defined. Okay, this other one that is not actually defined is for these currencies. At this point, let's clear this out. You can see that for currencies, do we still have any other error here? We don't have any error actually. You can see we have rendered our details on the screen, which is, but yeah, for population, this emoji right here is for population. And let's check if USA has a population defined in the API we made. So let's check for population. You can see we have population here, but why is it not being defined? No, it's not population actually. It is language. We have language, but the language that is there is actually, it has an object of eng in front of it. Let's do this. Language eng, and let's check it. You would see that it tells us that the language that is being spoken there is actually English. So also another thing we want to render on this is the currency. Let's go to the US currencies. You can see that here they have USD and the name. So let's also attach that currencies.usd.name. So this is how you render details on the screen from your API call. You can actually see that it has given us all the details that we want. Does anyone want us to add any other details to it again? Which other
Yes,
details
I can please add something.
I should add something else again. So
Yes.
let's add this. Let's check for something on the let's add what do we have? Let's add the capital actually. Let's add the capital. Let's call this capital. Let's call this capital. Capital. So you can see the capital is Washington DC. Let me click this. Control dot, that should actually give me alt dot.
Sir, please, I need to get something right. Like, when we are rendering it now, we need to just put dot at the end of the stuff. Okay, like this H3, where we have the country name. You said the reason why you are putting question mark is just to let us know that, okay, probably the data is not available at that time or something.
Yes,
I don't know if I get it
at
right.
that time. Yes, exactly. Because this is just that's the safest way to actually render your data. Putting a question mark, that is an optional chaining. Probably the data is not available. The next thing you just have to do is just the question mark there. It's just going to be an undefined actually, because there are some data you want to render on your screen which your users will need. And if that is not available, let's do this, or we just do this, or what will I put here? I'll put undefined. Undefined. So let's remove this common. Let's remove this common from it. So we can see that we just check this out and we'll see that we have an object. This is actually defined. This is actually defined. That is why it's giving us an object. So let's now put an optional chaining in front of it. Dot. Let's put country name. Country. Let's see what is actually going to give to us. It should give us undefined. You can see, because one thing we just did right here is that one, country name is defined. Data.name is available. But when you check inside data.name, country is not available actually. So data.name, data is available. You put an optional chaining in front of it. And the next thing you want to do there is you put your name, which is what is pointing to that data. You put what you want to attach to it in front of that data, and you go back to your API call. When you go back to your API call right here, you check the name. Where is it? The name right here. You can see inside the name you have common. Let's change it from common to official. Let's change it from common to official. So you will see that the undefined is not going to show. So let's do this official, and you will see United States of America. That is what is going to be rendered on the screen. Do you understand?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Paul, do you have any question?
Sir, the thing is, the context of what you are doing the whole of today, I've been really dealt with by network. But although I just want, what is the context? Yeah, I know that you are teaching us how to fetch APIs. You get, okay. My question now is that the fetching of API, does it relate to, okay, let me say I want to get the data for a particular person in a particular region, where the person is from, the country is from, and the country details. Are you trying to teach us how to get that particular individual country's detail and all those stuff that you started in this sprint?
Okay, this is it. What is an API call? Once you are making an API call, that means you are making a request to an external source to get details that is not readily available for you. If now you want to create a countries in your HTML and CSS and you want to render it on your screen, what are you going to do? You are going to add code, audio details, and in the world there are over 194 countries. But someone somewhere has created an API for you which consists of the list of all the countries we have in the world. What is the next thing you want to do? And you need the details of America. You get that API link, which is what I did here, this restcountries.com/version 3.1/name/KodeCamp. This KodeCamp is just a prop I am passing into it. Do you understand to that point, Paul?
Yes.
Okay. And the next thing I now did was, okay, I did a dot then, because when you are fetching with a promise, when you are fetching, it comes in a promise, and with that promise, it gives you 3 states, which is 1, the pending states, which is on click of any button. By the time you are making that request, it is the pending state, there is the fulfilled state, and there is the rejected state. Any of those responses, any of those 3 responses that is going to give you, you have to return it into a JSON, because when your data are coming, it's coming in form of bunch of data which JavaScript cannot read directly. So you have to convert it to a JSON data. Once you convert it to a JSON data, you do a dot then to catch the data that is inside it directly. That is why we have data right here. And we now rendered it. We have created this function that we are going to use to render the details on our screen right here on from line 9 to line 29. We have created this data. So what do? We just called the function. We have created that function up there. We just call the function and we call in the data right there. When we called in the data right there, when you call in the data right there, the next thing we have to do is we come here, we pass it as a prop, which is data, which is this data we pass right here. Paul, are you following?
Yes, I'm holding. Yes.
Okay. You pass that data as a prop right there, and it's that same data we used in this place. All through this place, it's that same data we used. The data we got from that API is simply what we used in rendering the details we have on our screen, because we can't render audio details we have from that API. We just have to render a few details. It is not everything. It is not everything that the user wants on their screen. It is just a few details. Now, you can't start rendering the status code, which I said I was giving you an assignment, because the next class will be going deep into, we'll be creating some code requests in the next class, whereby you need to know the difference between a success response. You need to know the difference in different success responses actually. So by the time you have the data, this data actually holds these various objects that we're actually attaching to it. This .flag.png, this .name.official, this data.region, every other thing, that is what is added into it. So when you have rendered it, this is all what is rendering the data on the screen. This article div, it is what is rendering the data on the screen, and that is what we have right now. So do you understand what I see?
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, but sir, can I see the code on inside HTML without the string that you put? Let me just see the raw code there, please.
This is the raw code. This is the raw code right here. This is the raw code right here. This is all I have in the HTML. This is all.
No, sir, don't delete it. Don't delete it now.
I want you to know that I am not calling anything in the HTML. This is the simple. I just have 21 lines of code in my HTML. I just have 21 lines of code in my HTML. And I am actually rendering that details on the screen from JavaScript, which is what I'm doing on line 12 in my JavaScript. Do you understand?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Do you still have any question? Are
No.
you clear now?
Yeah, I'm very clear now. But you push this one too, right?
Yes, I'm definitely going to push it. I pushed the last
All
one.
right, sir.
Okay. Yeah. So, ID, your hand was raised.
Yes, good day. Yeah, I was going through your code and I noticed that there's also one of the parameters is class name. But I don't know where it's being used. I understand the data, but I don't understand where you see class name.
Is actually, what's the name? Is a string. What's the name? Let me go back to my HTML.
Okay.
It's actually from my JavaScript. I'm actually adding a style directly from my JavaScript. Actually adding a style. Let's go to my CSS. Let's see. I have class name. I'm coming. It's actually something I'm adding from the JavaScript right here. Coming, just a second. Let me come in. Let me do this. Just a second. Okay. That is actually supposed to be like an additional style. I'm going to be adding a different style from my JavaScript actually. So like I will want to, as we go on, I'll actually want to add some additional styles to it. Like, okay, to this particular country, I want to add a different style to it. That is why I added that class name. Because if you check right now, we have a class name. Let me do this, and we go to our style.css, and I do some, and I do some, and I do this. I do dot class name, class name. Let's see. This is me manipulating a style from CSS. So I do this, and I have background color of red. Background color of red. So let's see what we have now. That is me trying to add additional styles to our code right from JavaScript. It's probably not going to show, but that is what I want to. That's what I'm trying to achieve. Adding that class. Adding that class to it. So by the rest,
You need to use capital N, or it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't really matter. It actually matters, case sensitivity. But you know, it's the prop that we passed. So class name unknown. So this is not. This is just telling me that the name is unknown. So oh, I actually use capital letter there and I use small letter here. So let's save this. So I didn't notice that error. So it's still let me check our element and see class name. The element should have shown up right here. But it's something I want to do in the next class actually. Try to manipulate the styles that we have for each particular one in our code base actually. So ID, we'll pick up that in the next class. Do you understand?
Noted.
All right. So does anyone have any other question before we continue? Do you have any question before we continue? Why is the class silent?
No, sir, we don't have, but we have question concerning the tax. Sorry.
You have questions concerning the tax. What what question? Which one should I answer now? You have not yet finished one. You're already asking me a question concerning the tax. Okay, okay, now you guys are going to decide. Should we stop here and I start attending questions from the class?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Is that
sir.
the mind of
Yes,
is
sir.
that the mind of everybody?
Yes, sir.
Just only 3 people have responded.
No, continue with the class.
No, yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. They said I should continue with the class. So
Oh, no.
no.
No, we said the task. Continue with the task. Let's see. Let's go on with the task.
It's gonna confuse us more if you are touching the class, the topic for today, and now it's the task. Let's just finish with the topic for today, and in the end of the class, you do the task.
All right. That's perfect. So I want to actually do something now. What I simply want to do here is, if you check this code, if we check the response from each one of them, you would see that there is I want to add borders, like the country that is bordering them. You can see now that the two countries that are bordering USA is Canada and Mexico. So now, what do I want to do? I want to render those two countries also on the screen, which is what I'm going to do. Are we following? I want to know that we are.
Yes, sir. Please continue.
Following. So
Yes, we are following.
Yes.
Right. So the next thing we are going to do right here is simply that we would right here. Let me clean up this console.log. Let me clear up. One thing you should always know is when you have finished when you are trying to push your code to production, or when you are all your console.log, kindly remove everything. Kindly remove all your console.log so that it won't your users won't be seeing your details. So the next thing we want to render is the neighboring countries. Let's use const border countries. Border countries equals, then we go again, we have data dot zero dot. The next thing we are now going to be checking out here is simply borders. You can see borders. And what do we have? We have this. Let's now console.log borders. Bordering countries. So let's see what we have. That's line 69. Line 69, you can see that we have both Mexico and Kenya. You see, we have both Mexico and Kenya. So what do we want? We can't render both of them. We can't make because it's an API call. We can't make a request to both of them at the same time. So we just have to select one. We just have to select one of them. So the next thing we have to do is, if we have to write a conditional statement, because some countries, you know, there are some countries that don't have neighbors. There are some countries that don't have countries bordering them. So bordering countries, and what do we want to do? We want to return it immediately. Sorry, please, are we all following? So
Yes.
all right. So the next thing we have to do now is we now have to return a function, because we are actually making an API call to this already. So what do we have to do is we have to do return function. We have the same fetch function we did the other time. Fetch bracket this, and let's copy this. We have to copy this. Let's copy this and put it right here. And we are now passing in bordering countries. This is what we are going to pass in right now. Control C. So we pass that right in. And what do we have to do next? Who can tell me what we have to do next? Who can tell me what we have to do next? Who can tell me what I have to do next if you're actually following what I'm doing? Not that I'm just doing something abstract. So we have to do a dot then. We do a response. I'm going to use an arrow function here. Response. No, let me follow the route I did it, which I did it with the other time. Function. And I have response. And we do this. We have return response.json. We do this, we do response.json, and let me also console.log it. You should know that if you want to write a console.log, you have to put it before a return statement, because if you write a return statement, if anything you write after a return statement is not going to work. So the next thing we now have to do is we do a dot then again. Do a dot then because we want to render the details. We do a function data, then we do render country and data, and we have bordering countries. So this is what we have. Then what is the next thing we now want to do is we are all set right here, and let's save it and see what we have. What is going on? Interim value is not, I'm having an error. Interim value dot then is not a function. Where is interim value? Line 78. Line 78. Okay. I know why. That happened. It's not supposed to be there. This is where it's supposed to be. So let's check it out. So we can see that script on line 10. Can see that we have on line 10. This our console.log is simply this. We have one, and you can see that we have Canada. Canada is rendering. Why is Canada? Okay, we have audio bordering countries actually. We have oceanic audio countries that is bordering America right after the other. So we have Central Republic Africa. No, this is not it. Bordering countries. Sorry, please. Are you guys following, or you are not? You don't understand what I'm doing? Okay, yeah, this is it. Hello, guys. Are we following?
We are following.
It's only one person that is responding. It's only one person that is responding.
We are following, sir.
So why did you repeat is it alpha or something in your code?
Yeah, I changed it to an alpha because that's the endpoint. That's the endpoint link actually. It is not name. It is alpha slash the bordering countries. That's what I have to.
Is it from the API?
Yeah, it's directly from the API. That's from the API. That's from the API actually. Check. Yes, sir. I'm coming. Just a second. Okay. So this is what we have right here. ID. 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 ID, are you there? ID. Has ID dropped off the call?
No, I'm still here. I'm still here.
So this is where I'm the class name I added right here. This class name I added right here is simply because I want to, because of the additional country I'm going to add to it here. So you can see I am passing the prop right here, which is neighbor. And let's check our browser and see what we have. .png. So now you can see that our neighbor country does not have png right there. So what is he having? Flags.png. Yeah, this is png right here. So why are you not rendering it? So why is it not rendering it? It's having flags.png, but let's change it to flags alone and see if it's going to render it. Data.flag. Let's check it out. So US is not rendering ENG because the language is not English. That is why Canada is coming. Currency also is not going to show. It's going to actually give us issues. The reason why this is actually happening is simply because the data that we are receiving for both countries are actually different. That is why it is not. That's why we have to start changing something one way or the other from our code to make sure they are working. Yeah, Falabi, you were saying something.
I said exactly like I'm saying that nothing has changed. Yes,
Nothing. The data we are receiving for both USA and Canada
Canada.
are actually different. So that is why we are having this error. Because if you
So
can
by the
check
time
the
we now
current,
change it one by one here, will it affect?
it's not going to actually make effect simply because
The
we
data
are
is
we
not.
are we are we are chaining two APIs together. But
Okay.
normally, if you are working with your own API, which someone actually built for you, the naming convention are going to be the same actually. So you don't have to be creating different. You don't have to be creating different. You don't have to be changing your name one after the other just to fit in what the first API, what the same
Okay.
API, what the API is actually saying. That's
So
just
one
that.
can actually create API by oneself, right?
Well, it's a backend developer that will create an API for you.
Okay, like if I'm to carry on a project now, will I be given the API or
Yes,
I'll
if
be the
you
one
are
that will can source for it?
no, if you are to work on a project actually, and it's going to be a front end and a back end application, you would have a
Okay.
back end developer that's going to give you an endpoint that you're going to work with actually.
Okay.
So that is it. So by the next class, I'm going to our backend, the guys in the backend track are going to give us APIs that we are going to make use of. So they're going to give us a crude API, which is going to be create, update, delete, and read. So that is what we are going to be working with in the next class. So the details we are getting from here is actually different. So that is why we we can't actually render it right now. So but I'm going to fix it. I'm trying to see which ones are similar to each other. I'm trying to see which ones are similar to each other so that we can just render it on the screen and call it a day. I can see script 69, 20, and 20, the 69 languages. Let's remove this. Let's also remove this and see. Let's also remove this and see. So you can actually see we have US, DC, and the neighboring country. The response we are getting are actually different. That is why we can see these neighboring countries. But the response we are getting from one is different from another. So that is why this is giving us the issue. But let me try another country and see. Because when I actually tried it out, there is also. So let's check this out and see if Portugal Republic coming, Lisbon. So we can now see, let's just do this dot common. Let's change this one after the other to see that they both fit. This other country is not, it's actually giving us issues, so there is no how we can fix it. We actually getting the country's name right here, which is Spain, which is actually Spain. You can see it's actually a Spain, um, Kingdom of Spain. So it should actually be Spain, but I don't know why it is not rendering on the screen. Simply for a reason best known to the API. So I hope we understood what we did in today's class. So it's actually laying a foundation for what we're going to do in the next class. Hello, hello guys.
Yes,
Do
we
you guys
did.
Yes, sir.
I did.
Okay.
Yes,
All
sir.
right. Okay. So thank you very much. We have come to the end of today's class, and I'll start answering questions from the tax now. So Paul, you said you have questions concerning the tax, so go ahead.